بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله ومن والاه. الحمد لله نحمد الله سبحانه وتعالى ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. So he begins with the ninth maqam. Ibn Sidi al-Mawaq said that there were, in each of the ظالم نفسه مقتصد وسابق بالخيرات, that each one of them has 3 maqams. And so he's going to go first from the top down and then he goes back up. So he calls it tadalli wa taraqi, descending and ascending. So he begins with the 9th, which is the hardest one, which is al-akhdhu bil-jaddi fi-ddin, being as serious as you can about the religion. And he begins with the opening of talking. We talked about this, that the life is a journey, and the journey, the years are like marahil. So the marhala it's a period of, it's a distance. And he says that the years are like the marahil, and then the months are like the farasikh. This is another farasikh, is the farsang in Persian. How far is it in Persian? It's 3 miles. Yeah, it's 3 miles. Because a mil is either 3,000 feet, 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet. There's khilafat about how long a mil is. But the masafa of traveling it's about 48 miles. There's again some khilaf about that, but generally it's about 48. And actually, in the Reliance of the Traveler is very accurate in those. He did a lot of research in that area. So if you're interested in the traditional weights and measures, there's a good book that was published in Malaysia on the weights and measures, which were very important. What a dinar is, what a dirham is, what a daniq is. All these are exact measurements. The sa'a and the mud. There's some khilaf about these, but I don't think anybody can top the Maliki madhab in the sa'a and the mud, because Imam Malik used the actual measuring cups that the Prophet ﷺ used to measure out the sa'a and the mud. And he proved that when he had a debate with one of the Hanafi scholars. He had somebody bring one of the sa'a and he said, "Where'd you get it?" He said, "I got it from my father." He said, "Where'd he get it from?" He got it from the Prophet ﷺ. End of argument. You know. So, but there are differences of opinions, and they're all valid in their differences. So, and then he says that the days are like miles and the breaths are like steps. And your obedience to Allah is the bida'a. That's like what you're carrying to sell when you get to the marketplace being Yawm al-Qiyamah. So your bida'a is your actions, and you bring them on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and then if they're worthy of buying, what you get is the reward for your actions. If they're not, then you come either with bad actions, which is it's like a bad bidah, nobody wants it, it's thrown into the rubbish. Or you actually you come owing money. So whatever good actions you have, it's taken and given to others because of your cursing them or for other reasons. And then he says that the shahawat, your appetites, are like quta' turuq. They're like brigands on your road of life. So they waste your time, they waste your energy, and life dissipates, because each breath is a step towards our death. And this is capital that you can't, what you have is, all merchants understand that you have capital and you have profit. The capital, like a venture capitalist, will invest even at a loss initially, because down the road he's hoping that investment will lead to profits. And this is why so much in the Quran is using the metaphor of merchandise, of tijara with Allah. There's two main metaphors in the Quran concerning this, the tijara and the zira'a. Tijara is commerce, zira'a is agriculture. And if you think about human life, this is pretty much the foundation of what our needs. They're covered by merchants and they're covered by farmers. The merchants supply what we need in terms of our clothes and our houses and all these other things. And then the zura'a, the farmers, supply what we need for our bodies and food. So the zira'a is planting seeds and then the harvest. So the planting is your investment and then the harvest is your profit. But you can always lose. It could be a bad seed. The soil could be bad. You could get torrential rains. You could get a dry year where there's no water. And so this is the nature of the world. The same is true for the tujjar. They can go to the souk and their merchandise doesn't move. There was a car called the Nova when I was younger, and they tried to sell it in Mexico and nobody bought it because Nova in Mexico means it doesn't go anywhere, right? So Nova, nobody wanted a Nova, it doesn't go. So even the name can affect the merchandise, right? And people in advertising know this, that you can take a name and it can change everything. Even with famous people, if you have names like Finkelstein, they tend to change it to some other name, or Zimmerman becomes Dylan, or because even names are a type of they have an effect on people. Using names that are easy or have two syllables, they work better, and that's why a lot of famous people have two-syllable names. If you'll notice, every once in a while you get the Schwarzenegger or something like that, and people learn how to say those names. But generally, marketing is a lot of it is just subterfuge and chicanery and legerdemain and all those other types of things. But on the Yom Al-Qiyamah, you can't do that. There's no marketing. You can't try to market your good. It's either a valuable good or it's not. And there's no fooling that judge on the Yom Al-Qiyamah. And so this is the metaphor that he uses. And so he talks about just the importance of seriousness in the deen. And one of the things Imam Shatibi says in his Muwafaqat, and Imam Shatibi, rahimahullah, was one of the great usuli scholars of our tradition. He wrote a famous book called Al-Muwafaqat in the Maqasid school of Usul al-Fiqh, which is the school of the ends and really the objectives of the religion. What are the objectives of the religion? And this school is a school that emerges out of Imam al-Juwayni and then Ghazali really begin this school. You can see, obviously, the Prophet ﷺ was working with this early, but they were the ones that really identified it. Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya argues that probably tahqiq al-manat actually is a technical term that comes from Imam al-Ghazali. So Ghazali introduced certain ways of legal reasoning and understanding the processes that hadn't been introduced before. And that's why he's so important, first and foremost, as an usuli scholar. He's known for tasawwuf in the common community. But amongst scholars of Islam, he's actually more known for his usul al-fiqh, which is really interesting to me, that he's not really thought of as a great alim amongst common people. They think of him as a Sufi, but he's actually one of the most brilliant legal minds that the world has ever seen. And his book Al-Mustasfa, anybody that reads that will know the level that he was working on. And among many other things that he did, he really put logic at the center of Islamic training, which it had not been before. And that's something that certain people that have animosity towards him fault him for. But he took it out of the epistemology of philosophy and put it into a type of grammar of thinking. So he understood it as nahu al-fikr. It's just the grammar of thinking. And he felt that it was very important for people that had to do legal reasoning to know that. So Imam al-Shatibi in his Muwafaqat, he said about the Salaf al-Salih that قهر السلف الصالح أنفسهم تحت مشقات التعبد وسووا بين الواجب والمندوب في طلب الفعل وبين المحرم والمكروه في طلب الترك وعدوا ما لم يعمر أنفاسهم بطالا. So what they did was they really they put themselves under the difficulties of devotion. So they were profoundly devotional people, and they did a lot of devotion. Somebody was asked me about the hadith about the Prophet ﷺ saying that he actually considered getting firewood and then burning the houses down of people that didn't go to the Jama'ah prayer of Isha and Fajr, right? Are the two prayers that the munafiqun tended not to go to. One of the things about that is, first of all, there's a khilaf about the Jama'ah prayer. Like in the Hanbali madhab, if you can hear the adhan and you have no excuse, then your prayers, it's like it's invalid next to a masjid. But the other madhabs, it's encouraged to go. Obviously, the Jama'ah, to establish Jama'ah is a very strong sunnah mu'akkadah. And so people are encouraged to go. But if somebody prays in their house, if a woman, there's no obligation or recommendation for her to go to the masjid. If she chooses to, then she can, and it's not makruh for her. To say that it's makruh to go to the masjid, the Prophet ﷺ said, don't prevent the women. It's mubah for the woman to go to the masjid. And in some situations, it could be strongly recommended when you have cultures where they don't have learning opportunities in their homes. Today, there's a lot of opportunities to learn, but in some places there's not. I actually like the Chinese method, where the women have their own masjids and the men have their own masjids. It just makes a lot of sense to me. I think in the larger Turkish masjids, the women's places are very nice. They're up and they give them a lot of room. In some of these other masjids, they're very cramped and narrow. If you go to North Africa, the women's areas are very problematic also. So in many cultures, the women just didn't go to the masjids. In the West, we have to really think about how we build our masjids. It's really important to take into consideration that many of the women are active. They're called, in the Hanafi fiqh, they call them barza, which is a woman who's actively engaged in the world. She has a completely different set of ahkam than women that are in the home. And so it's important to recognize that there is a difference between, for instance, even though it's not, a woman's forearm is considered part of her awrah, in the books of fiqh they say if she works, like harvesting, or if she's a physician, that they can actually raise their sleeves in their work. We know that the Sahaba saw the saq and the sa'id of the Sahabiyat and even the wives of the Prophet when they were nursing the sick, the wounded in the battles. So these are, Islam is very practical. It's not a religion that makes things difficult for people. And when people get too obsessive about these things, you create really unhealthy environments in cultures. When you have this kind of kipt there in the culture, you can create a lot of mental illness in these areas. It's like the man, the sheikh who was walking with his student, and there was a woman that needed to cross the river, and she was terrified and couldn't. And so the sheikh picked her up, carried her across the river, and put her down, and then they moved along. And About an hour later, he's looking at the student. The student's really troubled. And he said, what's wrong? And he said, Astaghfirullah, Sidi, I'm having bad thoughts about you. He said, why? He said, you carried that Ajnabiya woman across that river. He said, well, I put her down at the riverside. You're still carrying her with you. تركتها على ضفة النهر أنت ما لم تزل تحملها معك. So, I mean, that's a reality. Like, people obsess too much about these things and then they become unwell. But the Salaf were very strict about things. They considered no difference between wajib and mandub. One of the things about the Salaf is if they took on a practice, they never left it, which is why the Prophet ﷺ recommended to the Sahabi to fast only 3 days a month. He said, I can do more than that. He said, then fast Mondays and Thursdays. He said, I can do more than that. He said, then fast every other day, the fast of Dawood, but don't exceed it. That same Sahabi said towards the end of his life, I wish I would have listened to his first suggestion, because it became difficult for him. But the point is that he took a mandub and he kept the practice up. He didn't abandon the practice. If they took on a practice, they kept it up. That's why it's very important, whatever you do a little bit and be continuous in it. And if you want to add more, but don't لَن يَشَدَّ الدِّينَ أَحَدٌ إِلَّا غَلَبَ. If you try to take this religion on all at once, it will overwhelm you. So you take what you can, and then you do that little bit consistently. It's better to pray 2 rak'ats, every night, than to get up every once in a while and pray 10 or 13 or however many you pray, 8 at tahajjud. But to be consistent, and then if you want to add on, you add on, but do it slowly. Pace yourself. And so this is what he's saying. And he doesn't mean they conflated wajib and mandub. It's just that they, as practices, if the Prophet recommended something, they did it. And this was the early community. Now, part of the reason for that, and the reason that he was so strict about these things, in the hadith in which he said, Antum fi zaman, man taraka minkum ushra, ma umira bihi halak. وسيأتي على أمتي زمان من عمل بعشر ما أمر به نجا. You're in a time that if you act according to 1/10, if you leave off 1/10 of what I've given you, you'll perish. But there's coming a time for my ummah, if you just do 1/10, there'll be salvation for them. Abu Hamid says about this hadith, it's like, whew. He said, if we didn't have that saying from the Prophet ﷺ, we would have yes, because of what we see in our community and how far we are from that early period. Now, the commentators found that hadith to be mushkil, because they said it couldn't be in the fara'id, because you can't do, one prayer every other day, right? So they were trying to understand. Some of them said it's in Amr bin Ma'ruf and Nahi an Munkar. Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya actually thinks it relates to tahqiq al-manat, that there are certain things that will not be applicable in the time that you're living in the later periods from the Sharia. And this is important for the usuli scholars in particular to be aware of. And so they considered anybody that didn't fill their time with spiritual activities and a'mal khair, they considered them battal, just like spiritually unemployed, like just somebody wasting his time, battal. Imam Malik was asked about music, and he said, لا يفعله إلا الفساق عندنا. The people that do that are irreligious people in our community. So that's important to know. He's in Medina during the time of the Tabi'een. He's from the Tabi'een or Tabi'in, probably from the Tabi'in. But most of his teachers were Tabi'een. So they were people that took directly from the Sahaba. He's in Al-Qurun Al-Mufaddala. So when he says in Medina, the people that listened to music or engaged in music were fusaq. If you took those people and brought them here today, they would be our ulama. They would be our ulama. They would be like big ulama, and people would be amazed at how much they knew. I'm serious. I'm not exaggerating. I really don't believe I'm exaggerating. I mean, Ziryab, the great musician who was a student of Ishaq al-Mawsali's, he was a polymath. He knew so many different things. I mean, music was just one thing. Al-Farabi, the great logician and philosopher, was a master musician. You know, the story of Al-Farabi when he was in, I think it was Halab, you know, in the Sultan, he was there with the ulama, and he was dressed in Anatolian, because he'd learned mantiq from the Christians. And he was dressed in an Anatolian outfit. And he understood the dialect of one of the servants, and he was having a hard time communicating, and so he said that he could translate for him. And the Amir said, تحسن لهجته? He said, أحسن 70 لهجة. He said, I know at least 70 languages. And he said, تعلم شيئا من العربية? Do you know something about Arabic? And he said, نعم. And so he started talking with the grammarians. They all said, mashallah. You know, and then he knew mantiq, and he said, أتحسن العود? Do you know how to play the oud? He said, hati, you know, bring an oud. Because he wrote a book called Musiq al-Kabir. I actually have it. It's the big music book. It's literally this thick. It's called the Big Music Book. The great famous oud player Hamza Alauddin gave it to me. Allah yarhamhu. And Al-Farabi, he told me the story. Al-Farabi played a scale and made them all laugh. And then he played a scale and made them all cry. And then he played a scale and he got them all sleepy. Because he studied the effect of the maqam on the... This is why music is very dangerous in that way, because in the wrong hands, it can really affect people's souls. It can agitate people. That's why so many people, when they go to these concerts, they actually get very agitated and violent. A lot of them have to dance like that because the music does that to their bodies. And so the ulama were always very wary of music because of its power. And that's why so many of the ulama incline towards its avoidance in cultures, because it is very powerful. So Ali, وعلى هذا نبه حديث الندام يوم القيامة يندم المحسن ألا يكون ازداد ويندم المسيء ألا يكون نزع. So the one who does good will wish he did more on Yom al-Qiyamah, and the one that does evil will wish he hadn't done that evil. So this is one of the problems that happens to people. And Abu Hamid said, وَكُلُّ نَفْسٍ مِّنْ أَنفَاسِكَ خَاتِمَةً إِذْ يُمْكِنْ أَنْ يُكُونَ الْمَوْتُ مُتَّصِرًا بِهِ. Abu Hamid said, every breath that you take could be your last, because you will have a last breath that is connected with your death. And so this is obviously, it's something that the Qawm calls muraqabat al-anfas, like being vigilant of the anfas. This is something even in other traditions they do that, where they actually do breath meditation just about breaths. And the breaths are like grains of sand in that sand clock, that as you're breathing, they're diminishing, they're not coming back. And so this was one of the things that people used to meditate on. انظر على فرضا أنه ليس بآخر نفس فقد قال أرباب القلوب ما من نفس تبديه إلا وله قدر فيك يمضيه وحكمه يقتضي. يجب عليك أن تصرف ذلك النفس في طاعة مولاك وترضى بما يرد عليك منه وإن خالف هواك. فإن سوفت هذا النفس لنفس آخر ذهب هذا النفس وسيلحقك عليه الأسف. So there's no ما من نفس تبديه. There's no nafs that comes out of you except that it's it's a portion of a certain amount of nafs that you've been given to finish. So له قدر فيك يمضيه وحكم يقتضيه, but it also has something that is necessitated in that breath. In other words, what are you doing at the time? And one of the things that the Qawm asked was to think in whatever you're doing, if this was the last thing I'm going to ever do, is this really what I'd want to be doing? That was their approach. Remember that this is the highest maqam, so don't get like freaked out. Sorry. He's starting at the top. All right, so this is really the arifun. He's starting at the top. This is not for everybody. All three categories are chosen ones. They're all good. It's himma, it's where you want to put yourself. So he's starting at the highest, obviously, but Allah started at the lowest when He said, ثُمَّ أَوْرَثْنَا الْكِتَابَ الَّذِينَ اصْطَفَيْنَا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا فَمِنْهُمْ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ. In order to get yes out of your heart, He put that first, so that you didn't lose hope. Because He said, we chose them to give them our book. وَمِنْهُمْ مُقْتَصِدٌ. He's in the middle. وَمِنْهُمْ سَابِقٌ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. And so the sabiq bil khairat is with the permission of God, because He's the one that can get deluded by his good deeds. So the first one, he brings him first. Sorry about that. I'll turn that off. So he brings him first because, I really want to have that man. If I was the caliph, I would have him shot, the one that invented that ringtone. So, yeah. Because they get into your brain, and then you want that piece of brain back that they stole from you. If Conan Doyle was right, the mind is like an attic. There's only so much room up there, so beware of what you store. For people that like Sherlock Holmes. Because he didn't know the sun, went. He didn't know about this heliocentric theory, and Watson says to him, how could you not know that? He said, how does it benefit me to know that? Like, that doesn't in any way help me in my work. So I have no interest in learning something that's of no practical benefit to me. It's just, and then he says the mind is like an attic. I'm only going to store things I need up there. Nobody talks about an earth turn. Oh, what a lovely earth turn. Have you ever heard anybody say that? Yeah. They say, what a beautiful sunset. Why don't you say earth turn? Because that's really what's happening. I saw the most striking earth turn this morning. The fool on the hill sees the sun going down, and the eyes in his head see the earth spinning round. Because we're a schizophrenic people now. We've got all this information that goes against our fitrah, and we learn these things, and we don't believe them by fitrah, whether they're true or not. I mean, I'm fine with the heliocentric theory, but by fitrah we still really do experience the sun moving, and that's how everybody experiences it. So you can learn something theoretically, but you still don't think about it theoretically. You think about it experientially. And that's why people see the moon and the sun. They're moving. They don't think of themselves as turning around them. So he says, لا تترقب فروغ الأغيار فإن ذلك يقطعك عن وجود مراقبة له فيما هو مقيمك فيه. So Ibn Ata'illah says, don't waste your time. لا تترقب فروغ الأغيار. All these changes that are happening around you, that really the empty changes that are happening around you. All this, the aghyar is all the otherness out there, but because that will cut you off from being in a state of vigilance about God and what He is challenging you to be present in any given situation, because every situation has its hukam. And remember, this is the highest maqam. I mean, these are really the saints. قال إحالتك الأعمال على وجود الفراغ من رعونات النفوس. So this idea of delaying actions that you should be doing when you have leisure time is from a type of ru'unat al-nufus is the turbidities of your soul. It's the things that are preventing your soul from being pure. So it's the impurities of the soul. وانظر هذا مع الذي قالوه إنه التصوف أن يكون في الوقت فيما هو أولى في الوقت. وقيل لسهل ابن عبد الله التستري متى يستريح الفقير؟ قال إذا لم يرى غير الوقت الذي هو فيه. So he said that tasawwuf is really to do in whatever time you have the most appropriate thing to do in that time. And Sahal al-Tusturi, one of the early Sufis, was asked, when does the faqir, and the faqir was the person who was on a spiritual path, a serious spiritual path, when does the faqir have repose? He said, when he's out of time. Right? And that's why the Moroccan proverb, when somebody says, I'm really busy, he said, I'm really tired or I'm really busy, arahatu fil qubur. Repose is in the grave. Dunya is فَإِذَا فَرَقْتَ فَانْصَبْ. When you have free time, when you finish one thing, keep going to the next thing. That this is ked and jed. This is the nature of the world, that you wear yourself out. Al-Mutanabbi, the great Arab poet, said, إِذَا كَانَتَ النُّفُوسُ كِبَارًا تَعِبَتْ فِي مُرَادِهَا الْأَجْسَامُ. That when people have high himma in their lives, their bodies get worn out trying to achieve those aspirations. And so, on the other hand, your body is a beast in that way, and you have to serve it as well. So if you wear out the body, in fact, I read a Chinese Taoist text that was really interesting years ago. And one of the things that it said that it was a moral obligation to try to live beyond 50 because you cannot really start understanding life until you get into the 50s. And so you were actually, by wasting all that energy and wearing yourselves out before that time, that you weren't being fair to your soul. And that was his argument. I thought, and the Taoists believed that life extension is possible through their practices and things. We obviously believe in ajal, but still, we believe that you're supposed to take care of yourself. And we know now about biological time and chronological time. They're not the same. We know that medicine is being aware of that people are actually older. They can be older biologically than they are chronologically. And they can be younger biologically than they are chronologically, based on free radicals and the breakdown of the telomere wearing down, getting to the telomere faster than normal. So he's definitely talking about this high maqam. He said his Shaykh al-Minturi said that his teacher, al-Ustad al-Maqri, used to say, al-haqiqa عمل قوم على السوابق وعمل قوم على اللواحق والصوفي من لا ماضي له ولا مستقبل فإن كنت زجاجيا فبخن بخن. A beautiful statement. He says there's people that work, what they're doing is based on the past, and then there's people that what they're doing is based on the future, and then there's other people but he said the Sufi, he has no past and no future. He's only got the present. And if you're transparent, bakhin, you're lucky. If you don't have anything to hide, then you're a lucky person. Because there's people that are trying to make up for a bad past, right? And there are other people that have all these aspirations about the future. But for this, and that's why they say, Al-Sufi ibn waqtihi. The Sufi is the son of the moment. And what's interesting about Sidi Muhammad al-Mawaq is that he's a usuli, but he's part of a civilization, the Andalusian civilization, that was profoundly influenced by spirituality permeated their entire understanding. So no matter what science they were studying or looking into, spirituality. And it's very important for me that you understand that when he's talking about, like when he says Sufi, he's not talking about the modern concept of Sufi that people think about. And this is a great tragedy in our community, because the early people of Tasawwuf they were the most rigorous scholars. They were actually the people that implemented more than anybody else the religion. They weren't battalun, and they weren't people that sat around singing songs and then having couscous and things like that. That was not what they were doing, really. I mean, these are people that often ate every other day, and I mean, they kasur shahwatain, they were breaking their appetites. They had a khalwa here that was 1,000 days. They did a khalwa for 1,000 days. Could you imagine that? 3 years, basically. That was their khalwa. Imam al-Jazuli, one of the great usuli scholars, he's a hafidh in the madhab of Imam Malik. He knew the madhab. He has an opinion in the madhab. He has a commentary on Maliki textbooks. He went into a khalwa for several years. They said when he came out, people in Fez, upon seeing him, made tawbah. And he was and I've been in his khalwa, where he was in khalwa in Fez, and they said that he was hoarding gold up there, right? Rumors spread, like, why isn't that guy coming out of the house? And they said he was hoarding gold. So some of the Fezis decided they're going to go up there and so they went up. He had written moat on every single portion of the room. You could not see. He had literally written moat on every single portion of the room. So the whole room was covered with the word moat. Now people can say that's extreme. Well, that's why this is the extreme maqam. This is not for everybody, and people don't think you can do this stuff, because people go mad, quite literally. And some of these people, in fact, Imam al-Shibli was locked up. Imam al-Junaid had to lock him up because he had, and we know psychoses, there are spiritual psychotic breaks that happen, that people can literally become very unwell, doing a lot of dhikr and things like this. It happens. So it's always better just be moderate in your practice. And the Prophet loved moderation. But there will be people that take this road, and traditionally they had guides on it. So Tajuddin says, حقوق الأوقات لا يمكن قضاؤها إذ ما من وقت يرد إلا ولله فيه عليك حق جديد وأمر أكيد فكيف تقضي فيه حق غيره وأنت لم تقضي حق الله فيه. So he says that the reality of time is that you can never fulfill the rights of the time, because there's no time except that there's a right of Allah that's coming in that time, and you still haven't fulfilled the one prior to that time. And so this is the nature, hence, astaghfirullah fa inni astaghfirullah walau sab'ina marra. The Prophet ﷺ, he did istighfar every day, at least 70 times. In a riwayah, miyata marra, 100 times a day, astaghfirullah. When he finished the prayer, what was the first thing he said? Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. 3 times. Allahumma anta salam, sallam, sallam. Like, I know, and the Prophet has the perfect prayer, but what he's teaching us is, we could always be better. We could always be better. So right when you finish the prayer, the first thing is an acknowledgement of the naqs, the deficiency of your prayer. Astaghfirullah. قال عياض كان مالك لا يراه أحد من أهلي إلا ولا من أصدقائه إلا متعمما لابسا ثيابه لا يضحك ولا يتكلم فيما لا يعنيه يقول لا يكون العالم عالما حتى يكون كذلك وحتى يحتاط لنفسه بما لو تركه لم يكن عليه فيه إثم. So in the Tartib al-Madarik of Qadi Iyad, he said that Malik was never seen by his family or friends without his turban on, without dressing in his clothes. He did not laugh, meaning qahqaha. You know, it's a sunnah to smile, but he never laughed out loud. And the Prophet didn't laugh out loud. But he never laughed, and he never spoke about what does not concern him. I've met a few people that do this. It's very rare. The Murabt al-Hajj never speaks about what doesn't concern him. Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayy, I've never heard him speak about what doesn't concern him. I've never heard him say, he's totally uninterested in something that has no practical benefit for him. And you can't talk about anybody in his company. He won't let you. He'll just stop it. He said, kuffa an hada. He doesn't allow any ghiba. And that's very rare to have that, but min husni Islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'nihi. That hadith, which Abu Dawood said is one of the 4 hadiths, Abu Dawood said that he learned 500,000 hadith. وانتخب من 500,000 حديث. He said, وانتخبت منها ما ضمنته في كتابي, يعني السنن, what I put into my book, the Sunan. And he said, يكفي المرأة في دينه 4 أحاديث. It's enough for any person in their religion to have only 4 hadith. And that was one of them. So it's a really important hadith, leaving what doesn't concern you, minding your own business. So then he said that he never spoke about what was of no concern. Imam Shafi'i once asked him how old he was. And he said, "Aqbal ala sha'nik," mind your own business. And that's what he said to him. He was a lot younger than him. It wouldn't have been appropriate anyway. But he just let him know. And there's a musalsal from Imam Shafi'i. If anybody asks you how old you are, you say, "Aqbal ala sha'nik." So every alim after that would say that. If somebody asked him, how old are you? He'd say, "Bil musalsal an al-Shafi'i an Malik, aqbal ala sha'nik." You know, mind your own business. Imam Malik said, إذا أبحت بعمرك إما قالوا "Oh, ظننتك أكبر من ذلك. Oh, ظننت أنت أصغر من ذلك." He said, فلن تفلح. They'll either say, "Oh, I thought you were older than that," or "Oh, I thought you were younger than that." He said, you're not going to do well in that question. Yeah. So روى ابن القاسم عنه قال كان زياد يضع يده على كتفي ويقول عليك بالجد فإن كان ما يقول أصحابك هؤلاء من الرخص حقا لم يضرك وإن كان الأمر على غير ذلك كنت قد أخذت بالجد. So Ibn al-Qasim, who Ibn Wahb said, you know, Ibn al-Qasim was one of the great scholars, and he was a student of Malik, and the madhab of Malik is really Ibn al-Qasim's opinion more than any other, because he was the one that was with him the longest and for the last period of his life. So he said, he used to put his hand on his shoulder, Ziyad would put his hand on his shoulder and say, "Be serious in this religion. And if what your companions over there, those say about these rukhas are true, it's not going to harm you as long as you hold to what's more difficult. You know, don't follow the rukhas. Even though they're valid, don't follow them." Again, remember, this is the maqam. He's going the highest. قال ابن رشد حض زياد مالكا على أن يأخذ لنفسه في خاصته بأشد ما قيل في الاجتهاد في أحكام الدين. Ziyad told Malik, for yourself, in other words, not what you give other people opinions, but for yourself, take the hardest position. For others, make it easy for them, but for yourself, take the hardest position. فللمجتهد الذي كملت له آلات الاجتهاد في خاصته أن يترك ما رآه باجتهاده إلى ما رآه غيره باجتهاده مما هو أشد منه. So Ibn Rushd also mentions that about ijtihad in the ahkam of the deen, the mujtahid, and the mujtahid is, there's different degrees of ijtihad. You have mujtahid al-mutlaq, which is an absolute mujtahid. The mujtahid al-mutlaq is somebody who has reached a level of knowledge of the primary sources and the tools to interpret them that he can't take the opinions of others. He has an obligation upon himself to determine what his own position is in ijtihad. Because there are things, if they could, they would get you to leave your religion. Those people that, بَعْدَمَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنْهُ الْحَقِّ, right? Even after it's clear to them that it's the truth. What does Allah say to do about these people that want to repel you from your religion and force you to take? He says, فَاصْفَحُوا فَعْفُوا وَاصْفَحُوا. You know, forgive them, overlook them, right? حَتَّى يَأْتِي اللَّهُ بِأَمْرِهِ, until Allah brings His amr. Some of them say, brings His amr here is ayatul sayf. Some of the ulama say that. In other words, be patient until you have enough power and then you can knock them over the head. There's many ulama say that once the Muslims establish their power, they have a right to stop mockery of the prophets, right? And by the way, this was Christian doctrine as well. So you could not mock the prophets. It was a capital offense in Christendom. So this is not, you know, the modern world obviously has removed apostasy laws. But there were apostasy laws and mockery laws in the Muslim lands. But the point is, not all the ulama said that. Many of them said that it means until their ajal comes. You know, if they die, Allah will take care of them, right? Now, Fakhruddin al-Razi says, if we say all of these ayahs are abrogated by ayatul sayf, which is in the وَإِذَا انْسَلَخَ الْأَشْهُرُ الْحُرُمُ, right? فَاقْتُلُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ حَيْثُ وَجَدْتُمُوهُم, right? وَخُذُوهُم. So in the ayatul sayf in Tawbah, he says, you know, if once the Hurum months end, then اقتلوا المشركين حيث وجدتموهم وخذوهم, right? وقعدوا لهم واحصروهم وقعدوا لهم كل مرصد. You know, so fight them wherever they are, and so they say that verse abrogated all those verses in the Quran. This is the opinion of many scholars. Fakhruddin al-Razi says, if we say that, we're saying that makarim al-akhlaq nusikhat fi dinina. Then there's no meaning to sabr, there's no meaning to afu, there's no meaning to safah, there's no meaning to any of these things. And that's why you know, it's important for Muslims to really understand this, especially in the time that we're living in. At least take the position of Ibn Taymiyyah. You know, at least take that position, because that's the aql's position. And these, again, are ahkam sultaniyah. They're not private ahkam. They're rules that relate to governance. So if the government implements them, that's their prerogative, but they're not our rules to implement. And if the government doesn't implement them, there's no Muslim that can take it upon himself to implement those rules, like what happened in France. That's not permissible for Muslims to do that. It's haram to do that. First of all, it will lead to anarchy. Vigilantism leads to anarchy. And then if you say, well, now the khilafah is established, and so they can order these things, that's insane. You know, it's just madness. Because first of all, one of the conditions of the caliph is that they have to be able to defend the Muslim lands. And I'm sorry, these guys are living in a fantasy world. They live in fantasy land. One atomic bomb. That's all it will take. And zealots always, you know, well, you know, God's going to give us victory. It's not the way it works, people. Allah has sunan. The Prophet ﷺ was not suicidal. When he saw that the odds were not favored for him, then he didn't do it. And that's why the Quran, Al-ana khaffafa Allahu ankum wa alima anna fikum da'fa. Originally it was 20 to 1, right? That's the original parity. Allah said, no, I know that you're weak, so it's 2-1. At least don't flee when it's 2-1. So Islam is a religion of sunan. It's not, we don't believe in, I read a book when I was very young called Ayatul Rahman fi Jihad al-Afghan. And this book really spread in the Muslim world, and it was all about these miracles of the jihad in Afghanistan. Tayyib, look at Afghanistan now, 30 years, where is the Ayatul Rahman fi Jihad al-Afghan? Where are they? I'd like to see them, these Ayatul Rahman. And look at Afghanistan now, So Muslims have to be serious about this stuff and think deeply about it. They're big problems in the community. Abu Hamid says, اتقاء مواضع الخلاف مهم في الورع في حق المفتي والمقلد. That avoiding the positions of khilaf is important in wara' في حق المفتي والمقلد, in both the mufti and the one imitating them. فإذا أفتى المقلد فإذا أفتى المقلد إمامه بشيء ولإمامه فيه مخالف فالفرار من الخلاف إلى الإجماع من الورع المذكور. So if somebody is a muqallid and he gives a fatwa that is different from what his imam has said, then getting out of the khilaf and going to the ijma' is from this wara', from this scrupulousness. So you should avoid, in giving fatwas, you should always try to give what is the dominant opinion or the ijma' and not go against. وقال محي الدين النووي أهل العلم متفقون على الحث على الخروج من الخلاف إذا لم يلزم منه إخلال بالسنة. Imam Nawawi said that the people of knowledge are in agreement that one should avoid, should attempt to get out of any khilaf as long as it doesn't lead to some blemish in following the sunnah. And that's called the mura'atul khilaf in usul, which is if the imam, for instance, if Imam Shafi'i says you should do the basmalah, and he argues that it's part of the Fatiha, then because normally a Maliki would follow that, mura'atan al-khilaf, but because he's leaving a sunnah in his madhab, then he doesn't do it. So that's what he means. So you should usually follow the khilaf, but if it's going to affect a sunnah in your madhab or doing something makruh, because kurihat al-basmala, the basmala is makruh in the Maliki madhab. So you don't do something to get out of khilaf if it means doing something makruh or leaving a sunnah in your own madhab. If it doesn't, then it's good. So, for instance, with women who are menstruating and recitation of the Quran, there's a khilaf about that. The Malikis, though, permit it. And it's not really tatabu' rukhas to follow the Maliki position in that, because the rukhas are to get out of ibadah. So you're trying to get into ibadah. And so if a woman says, I'm going to take that position, then that's her prerogative as a woman, because she's not doing it to avoid ibadah or to make something easier. She's doing it because she wants to do more ibadah. And if she finds an imam that facilitates that for her, and it's a valid position agreed upon, then that's an example. Or she can follow her madhab that says that she shouldn't read the Quran when she's menstruating. But for some women, that's 10 days out of the month, which is a third of her lifetime. Right? It's a lot of time. And some women really need to recite the Quran just for their own well-being. Anyway. Those are khilaf issues. We respect all the imams about this. قال أبو مصعب كان مالك يطيل السجود والركوع وإذا وقف في الصلاة كأنه خشبة يابسة لا يتحرك منه شيء فلما أصابه ما أصابه قيل له لو خففت من هذا قليلا قال لا ينبغي أن يعمل عملا لله إلا حسنا قال تعالى ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا. Imam Malik, wow. Yeah. Imam Malik radiyallahu anhu, that he used to do a long sujood and a long ruku' in his prayer. And if he stood, he was like a dry piece of wood. Like he was just so straight. Nothing moved from him. And in the Maliki madhab, to move around is qillat al-khushu'. Khushu' is stillness. And this is why what's called idhar al-khushu', the Malikis consider to, they consider like to be like that, idhar al-khushu', that's makruh. To like show, you're actually supposed to look relaxed, but the khushu' is in that you don't move. That's the khushu'. It's actually not doing that. Like a lot of people do that. That's actually makruh in the madhab. I mean, I'm not making fun of anybody, but yeah, thank you. That's makruh to do that, to show, in the Maliki madhab. I don't know what he said, anybody that does something for the sake of Allah, he should do it really well. Allah says to test you to see which of you is أحسن عملا. انظر هذا الذي كان عليه مالك من الجد في الدين وما أجمع عليه العلماء من اتقاء مواضع الخلاف ومراعاة الأنفاس مع الله وإثار الأثقل على النفس والأفضل الذي لو فجأه الموت وهو عليه ما وجد أفضل منه. So he said, look at how these people were. Malik, look how serious he was in his religion and what the ulama agreed upon, avoiding these differences of opinion and guarding the breast with God and preferring difficult things on the self and recognizing that the best state to be in is that if death came to you, you wouldn't want to be in any other state. ولا يود أن يلقى الله إلا عليه كما قال السحنون وغيره وهو الحق الذي لا شك فيه. فمن ذم ما دون هذا المقام أو قال إنه من لهو الحديث أو قال بدعة أو فماذا بعد الحق إلا الضلال بالنسبة لهذا المقام فأقول بموجبه. So he's saying now فمن ذم ما دون هذا المقام, as for those who say that less than this maqam is lahu and it's bid'ah, or they say what's after the haqq except dalal, he said, I'm going to say فأما الذم مطلقا من غير نسبة إضافية ولا سيما وربما لا يكون هو في هذا المقام فذلك حجة عليه. Right? So he's saying, as to make some general blanket statement about that this is the only way, he said that's wrong. The nisba is idafiyya, and he said especially for somebody who's not in this maqam, to say that it becomes a hujjah against him if that's not his maqam. And then he says that the real sounds madhab, right? لِبَهَاءَ أَقَاوِيلِ الْعُلَمَاءِ فِي الْآيَةِ. Look at what the ulama have said in the ayah that I opened this book with, that there's three groups. ومن شأن العلماء بالله وبأحكام الله أن يذهبوا مع الناس في الرخصة والسعة ما لم يخاف المأثم. صح من التمهيد. So Ibn Abd al-Barr, one of the great scholars of Andalusia, said the ulama of Allah and of the ahkam of Allah, that they make things easy for people, make them expansive for people as long as they don't fear sinfulness. And this is from the Tamheed. ومن الرسالة رويم من جملة المشايخ مقرئا فقيها قال من حكم الحاكم أن يوسع على إخوانه في الأحكام ويضيق على نفسه فيها فإن توسعة اتباع العلم وتضييق على نفسك من حكم الورع. Ruwaym, one of the great Maliki scholars, he said, من حكم الحاكم أو from من حكم الحاكم, that a judge should make things easy for his brothers, the mufti in ahkam, but he should be hard on himself, because making things easy is ittiba' al-ilm, and making things hard on the self is the wara', it's scrupulousness. وسيأتي إن المرء لا يأخذ على أهله بالورع. A man should never force the difficult positions on his family. And then he says, ولما ذكر الإمام المربي المريدين البلالي ثمرات المحبة قال ومنها نظر غير الكفرة بعين الرحمة فمن فقد هذه العلامات كذب في دعوى المحبة. Imam al-Bilali says that from the fruits of mahabba is that he looks at other than the atheists with the eye of mercy, right? And فمن فقد هذه العلامات كذب في دعوى المحبة. And if somebody loses these signs, he's a liar in love, because the Prophet ﷺ loved people. And also, you know, I would put because there's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يؤمن أحدكم لا تؤمنون حتى تراحموا. You know, you won't truly believe until you have mercy with one another. لا تؤمنوا حتى تراحموا. And one of the Sahaba said, كلنا رحيم يا رسول الله. All of us are merciful, O Messenger of Allah. He said, ليست رحمة أحدكم لصاحبه ولكنها رحمة الناس رحمة العامة. It's not the mercy that you have to your brother. It's universal mercy. That's in the Musnad. So the Prophet was a rahmah for everybody. He even looked at disbelievers with rahmah. And so that's important to remember. And then he goes into the masarat of istilqa, which is it's an interesting, because of a hadith. And then he mentions about the dancing, the people of Habasha. And he has a very nice story here that I wanted to share with you. He says, he talks about that Ibn Rushd said, لا يجوز الاستدلال بالرؤية على حكم شرعي, that you can't use a vision that you see in a dream. رؤية is like رؤية العين with a ta. When it has alif maqsura, it's a vision, right? And so you can't use a vision to have a حكم شرعي, to have a legal ruling. وانظر أيضا من نص الشاطبي على جوازه. But Imam Shatibi permitted certain things. ورشح الجواز خوف أن يظن أن ذلك مما لا ينبغي مثل الإمام الذي التزم شعرا ينشده دبر كل صلاة. قال الشاطبي إن قوما أتوا عمر بن الخطاب. So Imam Shatibi relates a story that a group went to Umar ibn al-Khattab فقالوا له يا أمير المؤمنين إن لنا إماما إذا فرغ من صلاته تغنى. فقال له عمر يعني أحضره فقال له عمر ويحك بلغني عنك أمر سأني. فقال له وما هو يا أمير المؤمنين فإني أعينك من نفسي. قال فإنه بلغني أنك إذا صليت تغنيت. قال نعم يا أمير المؤمنين. قال أتتمجن في عبادتك؟ قال لا يا أمير المؤمنين ولكنها عظة أعيذ بها نفسي. قال عمر فقلها وإن كان كلاما حسنا قلته معك وإن كان قبيحا نهيتك عنه. فأنشد أبياتا منها نفس لا كنت ولا كان الهوى راقب المولى وخافي وارهبي. فقال عمر نفس لا كنت ولا كان الهوى راقب المولى وخافي وارهبي. ثم قال له عمر على هذا فليغني من غنى. So he said that he heard an imam that used to sing after he prayed. They came to Umar complaining about this imam. This guy prays and then he starts singing. So he said, bring him to me. And he comes and he says, I heard something really bothered me about you. I heard every time you pray, you sing. He said, well, first he said, no, tell me what it is and I'll help you with preventing me. And he said, you pray and then you sing. He said, indeed, I do that. And he said, are you being shameless in your worship? And then he said, no, it's just, I'd like to remind myself. It's like a wa'al. It's a idha. A'idhu biha nafsi. So Omar said, let's hear it. If it's good, I'll say it with you. And if it's not, I'm going to tell you not to do it. So he sang some lines. And from them, in Shad, this is in Shad. And he said, oh soul, you didn't exist, nor did my hawa exist. So beware of your Lord and fear him and be in awe. You know, it's like you're here now, but there was a point when you weren't here. So have some awareness of the one that brought you here. So when Omar heard that, he said the same thing. And then he said, those who wish to sing, let him sing things like this. Right? So he says, Shatibi says, تأمل قوله بلغني عنك أمر سأني مع قوله أتتمجن في عبادتك. So look at Omar saying, I've heard something about you that's bothered me, and are you being shameless in your worship? فهي من أشد ما يكون في الإنكار. This is like the worst kind of inkar that you can make on somebody, what Omar said to him. حتى علمه أنه يردد على لسانه أبيات حكمة فيها عظة. فحينئذ أقره وسلم له أحسن من هذا. قال الشاطبي هذا كان فعل القوم. قالوا وهم مع ذلك لم يقتصروا في التنشيط للنفوس ولا الوعظ على مجرد الشعر بل وعظوا أنفسهم بكل موعظة. So this is the nas of Imam Shatibi. He said, look at how he condemns him, but then when he hears that this is something that was wisdom and he was using it to exhort himself, and then he agreed with it, and even more than that, he sang it with him. So he says, this is the way the people were. They didn't just لم يقتصروا في التنشيط للنفوس ولا الوعظ على مجرد الشعر. It wasn't just poetry that they used to exhort themselves. They exhorted themselves with anything that was beneficial to them. انظر أيضا تنبيها على ما توهم وأنه يلزمه أنه يكرهه لما ذكر مذهبه في الدعاء أدبار الصلوات. Also the prayer after the salawat. عمر رضي الله عنه كان إذا صلى العشاء أخرج الناس من المسجد. They used to close the masjid, Omar. In fact, Al-Saud is the first dynasty in our history that has kept the Prophet's mosque open 24 hours. Because they used to always close it after Isha, from the Sunnah of Omar. So he would close it. فَتَخَلَّفَ لَيْلَةً مَعَ قَوْمٍ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ فَأَتَى إِلَيْهِمْ فَعَرَفَهُم فَأَلْقَى دُرَّتُهُ وَجَلَسَ مَعَهُمْ وَجَعَلَ يَقُولُ يَا فُلَانُ ادْعُ اللَّهَ لِي يَا فُلَانُ ادْعُ اللَّهَ لِي حتى صار الدعاء إلى عمر فكانوا يقولون عمر فظ غليظ ولم أرى أحدا من الناس تلك الساعة أرق من عمر لا ثكل ولا أحد. So he sat with them. He had his durra because he used to go and try to catch out people that were doing bad things in Medina. And there was a group of people that were remembering Allah. And so Omar sat with them. This is after Isha in the masjid. He sat with them and he said, make dua for me, so-and-so, make dua for me, and each one. And then it came to Omar. And they all said, he's tough. You know, he's a tough one. And he said, but I didn't see anyone that night with a more brittle heart than Omar. Not women wailing over their dead ones or anyone, you know. فقال رجل لأنس يوم يا أبا حمزة لو دعوت الله لنا بدعوات فقال اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. قال شاطبي إذا كان الأمر على هذا فلا إنكار فيه. So he's talking about dua as a group, you know, because some people reject that and say it's a bid'ah and things like that, right? He's saying, look at these people. Anything that was good, they supported it like that. And this is why he says after this, حقيقة البدعة المذمومة حسب ما يأتي هي التي تميت السنة أو تكاد تفضي إلى إماتتها وإن فعلها بعد تسليمة الرد صحت صلاته بإجماع وفعل جائزا. So he's talking about the dua after the prayer. Because the reality of a dua is something that kills the sunnah or leads to killing the sunnah. But things that are good, like making dua and things, are not. Okay, so can you please mention the 3 remaining hadith mentioned by Abu Dawud? Yeah. He mentioned إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. is one of them. The hadith from Umar radiallahu anhu. It's the first hadith that Imam Muslim begins his book with, and Imam Nawawi, he begins his book with it. إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى ومن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله من كانت هجرته إلى الدنيا يصيبها وامرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. So, everybody has, their actions are by their intentions, and he said, so everyone has what they intended. Whoever makes hijrah for Allah and His Messenger, his hijrah is for Allah and His Messenger. And if he makes hijrah for some dunya to attain it, or a woman to marry her, his hijrah, his migration is to what he made that migration to. And then the second one was this one, min husni islam al-mar'i tarku ma la ya'ni, from the good of a man, is that, I think it's from Anas, and it's a hadith in it's a hadith that's Imam Nawawi also has in the 40 hadith. And then the third one is لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يرضى لأخيه ما يرضى لنفسه. على رواية أبي داود, that he is pleased for his brother what he's pleased for himself. The riwayah that Imam Nawawi relates in the 40 hadith is حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. It's Abu Huraira, I think, relates that, and it's the 12th hadith, I'm pretty sure, in the Nawawi's collection. And then the last one is إن الحلال بينون وإن الحرام بينون وبينهما أمور مشتبهات لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس. So the halal is clear and the haram is clear, and between them are doubtful matters, and they're murky, and not very many people know those matters. فمن اتقى الشبهات فقد استبرأ لدينه وعرضه. So whoever avoids the shubuhat, the doubtful matters, he has kept the purity of his good honor and of his religion. He's maintained a kind of purity of his dignity and his religion. ومن وقع في الشبهات يوشك أن يقع في الحرام كالراعي, right? يرعى حول الحمى. So, and if you fall into the shubhat, then you're going to fall into the haram. Like a ra'i, somebody who's like a shepherd, he yarta hawl al-hima, he's grazing his sheep around a sanctuary. Ala li kulli malakin hima, ala inna hima Allah maharimuhu. Every king has a sanctuary, and the sanctuary of Allah are the things He's prohibited. Ala wa inna fil jasadi mudgha, idha salahat salaha al-jasadu kulluhu. وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله ألا وهي القلب. And isn't there in the breast of the human a lump of flesh? If it's sound, the whole body is sound, and if it's corrupt, the whole body is corrupt. Isn't it the heart? So those are the 4 hadiths that Abu Dawud said sufficed a person in their religion. Bismillah. Any other questions? No other questions? Allahu Akbar, huh?
You mentioned Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said 4 ayahs were abrogated.
The agreed upon abrogations are about the woman stays in her home until she dies, right? And then the divorce, the rada'at. There's offhand I can't think of them right now, but the abrogated, the idea that the Ayatul Sayf abrogated all of these ayahs of akhlaq, it's very difficult to swallow that. And the proof, I think, that they're muhkama is that there's no ikhtilaf. There should be no ikhtilaf in the Quran. We can differ about what the Quran means, but if you have ikhtilaf about whether a hukm is nasikh or mansukh, you should go that it's muhkam, that it's applicable. And those hadiths that they consider abrogated are really abrogated for the government, not for individuals. So the government doesn't forgive for wrongs that occur to citizens, whereas a person can forgive the wrongs that are done to them. Yeah. Okay. All right. Subhanakallah. I'm a little tired. I'm going to apologize also for the, I haven't been around as much, but I'm actually at the end of a very long period of just doing too much. So my apologies for not, I would really like to spend more time with people, but I'm actually physically very, very exhausted. And I don't even like to teach in this state because my brain doesn't function as well as it does when I'm rested. And so I'm worried about just recalling things and forgetting things. So anyway, I just, I know everybody's, I'm happy to just be here with you all, but my sincere apologies for not being more social. Yeah, so my time is up.